Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Echo Voices. Today's session, February 5th, 2025. We have emergency preparedness for AAC, essential strategies. We have Krista Davidson from the University of Iowa and Teresa Thompson from Lingraphica joining us to talk about emergency preparedness. I personally am very excited about this, and I was very, very happy to be able to bring them to you. So with that, I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to them. All right, all you guys.
All right. Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. Okay, so we just want to thank you for inviting us. We are really excited to be here today to talk about emergency preparedness for AAC. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Teresa. I am the clinical education manager at Lingraphica and a speech language pathologist, and really excited to be presenting with Krista.
Hi, everybody. I'm Krista Davidson. I'm a clinical professor in speech language pathology here at the University of Iowa. I've been here over 7 years now, but I've specialized in AAC my whole career, almost 20 years. I'm also the co-chair of the Disaster Relief Committee for the United States Society for AAC, which I suppose adds to my credentials for this presentation. And I'm very excited to be collaborating with Teresa again and teaming up with Lingraphica to bring you this content. We met when she was a guest presenter for my AAC class here, and she heard about the first responder trainings I was doing with graduate students, and she was interested in learning more. And then those conversations culminated in the webinar we're providing today. So we both feel that emergency preparedness and community outreach are really important, but can also be overlooked in the field of AAC. And admittedly, I could still be doing more with my own clients, so don't feel bad if you're in the same boat. We're here to give you information, research, and practical solutions to make a difference in your service delivery so that AAC users can be prepared when accidents happen or disaster strikes.
Thank you, Krista. And you guys will get to hear about some of the great work Krista's been doing, including the Rescue Voice, the app that she's created. So we do have some financial disclosures. I'll go first. I'm an employee of Lingraphica, so I receive financial compensation from Lingraphica.
Yeah, and I'm an employee of the University of Iowa, and I'm also the inventor of Rescue Voice, and I receive a percentage of its sales. And like I said before, I'm the co-chair of the Disaster Relief Committee for USAC.
Awesome. So we do have a QR code here. You can scan this, or you can visit the website link, which Krista is going to drop into the chat. This is a one-stop shop for you where you can access course handouts, and just little disclaimer, they'll be just a bit different from today because they reflect our original presentation, which was a bit longer, but the content is the same. But this will also give you access to a free communication board download designed for communication in emergency situations. We'll be showing you that a little bit later. A communication ID card, and then we even have some follow-up continuing education opportunities that you can pursue on this topic. So do check that out if you're interested. So our learning objectives for today are to recognize the role SLPs play in educating and preparing clients for emergencies and disasters, state at least 2 strategies to help prepare AAC users for emergencies, identify 3 key elements used in the training of first responders about AAC, and describe 2 resources available to aid in communication during times of crisis. Our agenda, we are going to start by defining the why, looking at the research, discussing why it is important that we are thinking about emergency preparedness for AAC device users, or AAC users in general. Then we'll dig into some tips for preparing our clients, and then Krista is going to give us some great information about preparing our community and the first responder training that she has personally performed with the University of Iowa. And then we're going to walk through some resources. We always want you to feel like you're walking away with things that you can use right away. And then we'll conclude. And as was mentioned, please do feel free to ask questions as they come up today. All right, so defining the why. So it goes without saying that access to AAC in emergencies is essential, right? But that's also unfortunately challenging. So AAC users face really unique challenges during times of emergency. And while they really need access to communication tools in these situations, unfortunately, that's not always the reality. So being proactive about emergency preparedness and establishing a plan is really critical for this population because unfortunately, disaster plans are just not designed for people who use AAC. AAC users are at increased risk during emergency situations. They are more susceptible to adverse events, and compared to those without a disability, research shows us that individuals with disabilities in general are 2 to 4 times more likely to die or be critically injured during disaster situations. So that's just mind-boggling and upsetting. And they are 4 to 10 times more likely to become a victim of a crime. So really powerful numbers. And hopefully, again, by being proactive about disaster preparedness with our clients, we can be part of the solution in helping to reduce these statistics. So when discussing this topic, it's important that we're considering insight from AAC users themselves. We want to know how have they felt after encountering disaster situations. So we're going to talk through some results from a survey that was given to AAC users who requested assistance from USAC during Hurricane Harvey. And the survey results indicated that people who use AAC and their families were unprepared prior to the disaster, and they didn't have the resources that they needed during or after the disaster. So perhaps they didn't know how to access resources, or they didn't know what was available to them. And they also reported, not surprisingly, that the loss of AAC tools severely impacted their daily lives and the lives of their families. And I know that makes a ton of sense. Not having access to functional communication is, as we all know, detrimental to daily life in general, much less during an emergency situation. So we wanted to highlight a few things from that survey. So just looking at preparation over on the left here, 8% of those surveyed felt that they were prepared before Hurricane Harvey. 69% report having or working on an emergency plan after Hurricane Harvey. So that's fantastic. But 31% still did not have a plan. And really important, and I think we can all really come into play here as clinicians, 0% had practiced their plan. And then over on the right, looking at the impact. So 85% of respondents said that they lost or damaged their communication system during the hurricane. So that obviously impacted their ability to communicate during and after. And then another really important number for us to pay attention to, 38% said that they didn't have the vocabulary that they needed on their communication system that was relevant to the situation during the disaster. Okay, so thinking about the why when it comes to our clients, it is very likely that they may be separated from their device or their AAC tools. If they have a high-tech device, they may not be able to charge their device if there's a lack of power or if they are displaced, or their device may be damaged in the midst of an emergency situation. And they may even be separated from familiar communication partners, and they are very likely going to need to communicate with first responders. And then the why is related to first responders. So they need to and likely want to know how to communicate with AAC users but often they haven't been trained, right? They may have limited background knowledge on different communication challenges and different disabilities. So this is a really great quote from Miriam Bosch, who's also on the USAC Disaster Relief Committee, which Krista, as she mentioned, is a co-chair of. So I just wanted to highlight this quote. She stated, "It's crucial for people who use AAC and their families, as well as professionals," so there's us, right, "and other key stakeholders to address directly disaster preparedness to help mitigate against some of the challenges people who use AAC are likely to encounter." So we just discussed some of those challenges, and this leads really nicely into the next section where we're going to consider our scope of practice as SLPs. But again, just look at this quote. It's important for us as professionals to directly address disaster preparedness. All right, so let's talk about how we can best prepare our clients. So we wanted to just kind of open up the chat here for a moment and hear from you guys. So we're interested in whether you have a disaster preparedness plan in place. I think as we were working through putting this presentation together, both Krista and myself realized there's a lot of improvement that we can do for ourselves, our families, our own safety. And as we are thinking about our clients today, we also urge everyone to leave here thinking about yourself as well. And if you don't have a disaster plan in place, start working towards one. And then our second question is, are you currently addressing disaster preparedness in treatment? So we're just going to pause for a moment, and
I'm watching the chat here for you. You're a quiet bunch.
I don't think most of the school districts I consult with have them. So a disaster plan. I do not have a plan in place.
Yeah.
No and no.
Oh, yeah, and I feel like that's why we're here today, so we can give you some more information. Yeah, they have plans in the classrooms, but they don't always link up to the first responders. And then exactly, we've got not only communication, but we've got physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities, wheelchairs, and other adaptive equipment to think about for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you guys for hopping in and vision and hearing disabilities. Yeah.
Yep, all right. You're not so quiet. I appreciate all the comments.
Absolutely. All right, and as Krista said in the beginning, you're not alone either. As I said, we realize we have some development to do personally and professionally on this as well when we were putting this together. So hopefully we can all move forward in our preparedness efforts. Okay, so we just want to address scope. So the question, has come up, is this within a speech language pathologist scope of practice? Definitely. It is in our scope to advocate for AAC users and to educate others. It's in our scope to work with people who use AAC and their families to actively engage in disaster preparedness. And just like any interventions we're doing, emergency preparedness activities should be person-centered, right? We should account for the individual communication needs of the client in front of us. And as was just mentioned in the chat, considering the whole person, and if there are other needs, whether they be considering wheelchair, considering cognitive function, considering hearing and vision challenges, person-centered care, as we always provide. And then approach things from the viewpoint of that particular client and the person who uses AAC. All right, so preparing our clients. So we are going to talk through these in detail on the following slides, but a quick look at some ways we can help our clients prepare. So we want to think about providing light tech alternatives, educating our clients on putting together an AAC go bag, practicing and role-playing scenarios in treatment, and including practicing and role-playing scenarios that involve first responders, and adding disaster preparedness goals to our interventions. And there are some great resources out there to help you do all of this. So again, we hope you walk away today feeling like I have a ton of resources to support me here. So one great resource is USAC, the Disaster Relief Committee. So they actively respond to disasters, and they will replace lost AAC equipment at no cost to the device user or their family. They do that by partnering with other USAC members, other professionals, disability-related organizations, and government to provide the assistance that these clients may need. And then they also offer a really cool specific tool for AAC device users called Disaster Preparedness for people who use AAC. So Krista's going to drop some links into the chat again here, but we'll be showing you some aspects of this kit. It's a free toolkit. It contains resources like sample emergency plans, tasks that device users should complete to be ready for a wide range of disasters. And when signing up, it is recommended that the AAC user select a disaster partner. So they will also receive the communication about these tools and ideally support the person who uses AAC during a disaster. Once they've completed this kit, they'll have some really great personalized tools and concrete actions that they can take in the event of an emergency. And again, we're going to talk through this in more detail on the next few slides, but the recommendation here is that you sign up for this too, and then work with the AAC users on your caseload to help them develop these tools and practice with them in the treatment room. Okay, so when you sign up for this plan, it is a text-based plan. And when you enroll, you choose whether you want to enroll via text, via email, or WhatsApp. So email and WhatsApp allow for international users to be supported as well. And then once you've signed up, you'll receive a message every 3 days for 21 days. And the messages are going to direct you, the AAC device user, the family, to take on different types of tasks. So for example, it starts out with just signing up for emergency alerts, and then it moves on to health and communication aspects of preparedness. So there is a communication passport that gets sent out. There are communication boards based around emergency needs and shelter needs. There's information about preparing an AAC go bag, and then just developing and practicing that emergency plan. So some examples on screen, you see the first page of the communication passport here. It's going to allow a device user to do some pre-documentation of things that they will want medical or emergency personnel to know about them. And then over on the right, this is more of a one-page quick document, a personal emergency profile. It has areas to fill out like emergency contacts, allergies, medical needs, and so on. And we recommend incorporate getting these filled out into treatment, and then have the device user laminate them and keep them on hand in case of emergency, and also add them to their go bag. Okay, so speaking of a go bag, what should be in that? And I just want to give the quick disclaimer here that these recommendations are specific to AAC. We know that creating a go bag in general for disasters and emergencies is a really important step. So this list does not include those general go bag items. This is more specific to AAC. So it should be in addition to a standard go bag. So the first thing here is it's a really great idea for your clients to have the contact information and the warranty information for their device manufacturer so that they can reach out to them if something happens to the device. And also having the serial number of the device is really important. And then a go bag should have backup communication tools in there. So a laminated alphabet board, laminated communication boards, the communication passport. If you can print out some copies of speech generating device displays from their device and laminate those, that's a really great tool that they're going to be familiar with. And when developing these tools, make sure that there is vocabulary relevant to their individual health considerations. So any special instructions on things like feeding or lifting or special care needs, those should be incorporated so that they can be easily communicated to unknown communication partners. And then, of course, a list of medications, contact information for their support team, and even pictures and names of family members and pets who sometimes get lost in a disaster, right? And then really important to have a backup charger and a portable power bank in that AAC go bag, which should be waterproof.
I just want to jump in here too and say that as the disaster relief committee, as we do get these requests, because we've had all these natural disasters, hurricanes, wildfires, and we do get these requests for people to replace their systems, and sometimes they don't know the name of the system or they don't have it backed up anywhere. And so all of that information, like the contact information for the device manufacturer, the serial number, it is really important, because when we're trying to help them get a replacement, if they don't know what software they were using, or they don't know it's called a NovaChat, or it's called that it's called TV Snap, whatever it might be, it is really important when we go to replace that equipment.
Thanks, Krista. Okay, and then Krista kind of led into some more special considerations, backups. It is really important that devices are backed up. So urge you to work with your clients to make sure they are backing up their devices, help them establish a schedule. Find out with whatever system they're using, how do those backups occur? Do they occur automatically when connected to Wi-Fi? Is this something that the client needs to go in and do manually? So figure that out with them and make sure the device user and their family or communication partners know how to do backups, and then set a schedule for that. So perhaps they're backing their device up once a month or every 2 weeks, and it just goes into their calendar and becomes a really routine task. We saw those statistics in earlier slides where a large amount of AAC users lost their devices in an emergency. And as Krista just discussed, if a device is lost or damaged, the AAC device user can reach out to USAC or the company and get a loaner or a replacement device, but they want their information available on that. And if it hasn't been backed up, they're going to be missing information that's really important to them. Also, in the event that somebody's device gets separated from them, if they can tag it with a laminated or waterproof label with their contact information, it can hopefully get back to them. And then also, and this is something I would say would go into that go bag, laminate a picture of the device user using their AAC system, especially if it requires special positioning, mounting, or certain accessories. That's going to allow first responders and unknown communication partners to see, how this needs to be set up for this person to use it effectively. Okay, so some specific tips for integrating all of this into therapy. So first, practice social narratives with your clients about emergencies and disasters, and do some role playing. And just like anything that we're doing, that positive practice in the treatment room is really going to help our clients prepare and generalize outside of the room. So practice with the tools that we've talked about today, practice communicating in an emergency, and even if you're able, practice communicating with first responders. You can role play that in the treatment room, but some AAC users have initiated going into their local fire department or their local police department. If you're in the schools, maybe the department can come visit. If they go in, they let them know, hey, this is who I am, and these are my communication needs, and I want you to know about me before an emergency occurs. That's actually one of the steps in the USAC toolkit that is recommended. So that can just be really powerful and something we encourage our clients to do and even take part in if we have that kind of flexibility. We want to provide training to family on how to help the client during a disaster, and again, create disaster specific vocabulary. So whatever device your client is using, look through it, see what may need to be added to make sure that your client has access to the communication they need during and after disasters. If you recall earlier, a large percentage of AAC users who went through Hurricane Harvey reported not having the vocabulary they needed in the moment on their device. So, do look at the vocabulary in their system, think critically about what they may need and what may need to be added or customized specific to the user. So again, medical needs, medical alerts, but then just more generally, like, where are they located? What are the regional disasters that they may experience? Let's make sure they have that vocabulary in there. Think about more global disaster vocabulary needs. And just think realistically, about what may be going on in their area, and make sure they have that. Okay. Also note, it's always helpful to get an idea of how to set goals, right? So it's great to think like, okay, I'm going to do this in therapy, but how? And how do I set goals for this? So right now, hopefully you are feeling inspired. You have some ideas of what you can do for treatment and how you can use some of those resources. But again, may feel stumped on how do I make that measurable? So these example goals come from an article that we've referenced many times today. It's by Miriam Bosch and colleagues. I encourage you to read it in full. We do have the references at the end of the presentation, but it's called Augmentative and Alternative Communication Disaster Preparedness: Roles, Responsibilities, and Opportunities for Speech-Language Pathologists and Other Professionals. Really great resource. So again, these goals come from that article. And looking at the sample goals here. So the long-term goal is pretty straightforward. The client will communicate effectively in an emergency or disaster, both with familiar and unfamiliar communication partners. And then here's some sample short-term goals. So the client will complete an emergency communication profile, and then with whatever level of assistance, applies to that specific client. Of course, you're adjusting the queuing and the assistance based on, your particular client, but they'll fill that out and then do that with a familiar communication partner, practice it with a familiar communication partner. With prompts, your client will share that emergency communication profile, again, both with their familiar communication partner and then with an unfamiliar communication partner as well. You see the third one there, client will use a communication board in different role play scenarios. We can be doing that in the treatment room. And then if you can't get that first responder in there, let's try and get some unfamiliar communication partners to practice that role play as well. So just some ideas of goals to get your juices flowing and incorporated into treatment. All right, so in summary, some recommendations from this section. Sign up for the USAC Toolkit. Again, there's some really great resources there, and if you don't have an AAC device user that you're working with right now, that's okay. Go ahead and sign up and get familiar with the materials and what's provided. And honestly, this can certainly benefit any client that you're working with, from an AAC device user to someone who just has other communication challenges. So sign up and then integrate the tools into your therapy sessions. Keep in mind that, you may need to modify the tools to meet your client's needs, whether that's their cultural needs, linguistic, tech needs. For example, you may need to change the preferred language, or you may need to simplify as necessary. So always keep that person-centered care, at the forefront. And then finally, reach out to those first responders. When you've established tools for your client and you've practiced and you've role-played in the treatment room, take that step to see if you can facilitate introducing the client to local first responders. It's just going to allow them to become familiar with how this person communicates prior to an emergency situation. And it's going to have that effect of just increasing your client's comfort level in communication in an emergency, and just increase overall awareness of first responders. And Krista is going to dig into that next. So I will transition to Krista.
Yeah, so now that Teresa's covered many of the various ways you can help prepare your clients, I want to transition over into how you can help prepare first responders in your own community to assist people who use AAC in times of crisis. So, if we don't help, who will? We really need to be part of the solution. And so what does preparing the community look like? Well, it could be awareness activities during the month of September, which is the Emergency Preparedness Month, or October for AAC awareness. But why box us into any one particular month? It could really be any time of year. You can put infographics around your workplace, around your schools. You can post on social media. You can send informational flyers to local agencies. You can create your own communication boards and tools, or distribute some of the ones that we're sharing here today. And then one of our most effective, albeit more time-intensive things that you can do is present directly to first responders about AAC, either in person or virtually. And so on that note, I'm going to tell you more about what I've done at Iowa, along with my SLP graduate students, with respect to outreach. So first, a little backstory. As a member of the United States Society for AAC, I saw a mini grant opportunity advertised for educating your area first responders about AAC. And I thought, this might be a good match for community outreach opportunity for me and my students. And then also my husband was an EMT and volunteer firefighter for over 12 years. So I sort of felt connected to first responders, and I felt pretty comfortable talking with them. So I applied, and I was awarded the grant. And so part of my preparation for going out into the community was meeting with Marisa Rang and Sharon Mankey, who were the originators of the First Responder AAC training, or FRAC. And it's their framework that really laid the foundation for the presentation. But I made modifications and additions, and I would encourage anyone to tailor this presentation to their own needs. For example, this is new. I don't think Teresa knows about this yet, but we're going to be presenting to our local paratransit service later this month. And so we're going to adapt the presentation for the needs for the people that will be attending that presentation. But the slides that we typically cover in our presentation, this is kind of, it's on this slide, kind of the outline. We talk about the basics. What is AAC, who uses it, and access methods. And then we use pictures and videos and examples because some of the first responders, they've never seen this before. And we talk about how to be a good communication partner, like wait time and the types of questions you're asking, and even what partner-assisted scanning is and what it looks like. And then we bring low-tech and high-tech devices that can be passed around. And then we also pass out communication boards that they can keep. We used to make our own in the past, but now we use the boards from Lingraphica. I was able to partner with Teresa and Lingraphica, and they took the boards that we made on BoardMaker and made them better. They're based though on the direct feedback that I got from the first responders that we talked to. So that's what is on those boards. And then we divide the group into smaller groups or partners, with one person playing a victim and the other playing the first responder. And we work through some role play scenarios where they practice using the communication boards. And then we talk after each scenario. We ask them what went well, what was helpful, what they could do differently. And then they really tend to get more invested each time they do it. And then we always have time at the end for questions and other discussion. Now, I've seen a few things pop up in the chat. Is there anything that, Teresa, that I need to touch on?
I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this question as well. Really great question. Any tips for clients who may be worried of communicating with first responders due to their immigration status? So I answered, but I'm going to throw it to you.
What was your answer?
My answer was I would suggest having the copy of their rights when communicating with ICE laminated and having that in their emergency materials as well. And then to role play those scenarios in the treatment room as well. But just curious to see if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I know that's what I was thinking. I just recently was looking about what I could say to ICE if someone was coming to for like one of my clients, or came to our clinic. And so yeah, I think looking at the rights and like the statements that you can make to advocate for yourself in those situations. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have anything more than that, I guess.
I think it's certainly a good area to also be looking at the vocabulary and their device and making sure that they have the ability to communicate their rights and, communicate on that topic as well.
Right, some pre-programmed phrases so that they're not really having to put that all together on the spot when things are already, escalated. So
yeah, and then having the light tech backups of that as well.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the slides. I'm on the next one. Go into role play examples, Teresa, if you want to advance it. So these are just two sample scenarios of what we use. We have one pediatric case and one adult here. We don't give the person playing the first responder the information about the victim. So they have to obtain that information from the victim using the communication board. So we kind of, they get passed out little slips of paper so they know their roles, but they don't really know about the victim. And we usually have time for about 3 role plays. And then we've modified these role play scenarios based on the feedback from the first responders. Previously, we had more scenarios where the AAC user was an informant, but not the victim. And the first responders indicated they would prefer if the user was the victim. So we adapted that. And so those are just 2 examples that seemed like a likely situation that they might encounter. And then just some photos that here we are presenting at 2 different fire departments. Sometimes I just have 1 or 2 students that present with me, and sometimes I have more. So I take whoever's available. So I, as the new students come in, I kind of put out an email and ask who wants to join the first responder training group. And fortunately, I keep getting volunteers. And so the students learn how to do the training, and we go out together. And in that picture on the right, we didn't even mean to color coordinate that day, but we just have a lot of Hawkeye spirit here. And so that's us doing the work in the community. So now I have to say, this all sounds pretty great. But offering the presentation wasn't without its challenges. So let's be realistic here. This wasn't just picture perfect, shall we say. The old saying is, it helps to have connections, really rang true. So knowing somebody in a department proved key to get a foot in the door. So we did 1 presentation, and then we had a big gap, about 6 months or so, before we were able to do any more. And the change came when I recruited a new team of graduate students to the project, and several of them knew some Iowa first responders who then welcomed us to present. I've tried cold calling or cold emailing some agencies and not hearing anything back. The other thing is that first responders, they often have lots of different continuing education that can be more pressing or more relevant. Like I had a fire department cancel, but luckily they rescheduled one time because they had a house burn training, and that took precedence over our training. Also, the fire and EMS agencies only meet once a month, typically, and they plan their meeting topics like way in advance. Some are all volunteer run, and it can be difficult to get in touch if it's not their primary job. And also, like the EMS and the firefighters, they get called out even while we're presenting. I've had half the room leave because, a call goes out. So it's kind of tricky. Then we offered virtual trainings to reach agencies that were more than an hour away from us. But I will tell you, it is more difficult to interact and provide the feedback via Zoom, especially during the group role play activities. So I do think in person is preferable. But I still, getting the information out is even more important. So Each department also recommended slightly different vocabulary for the boards, and we can't accommodate everybody's needs or requests, because we only have a certain amount of space. And a lot of times we don't get the feedback till after the presentation, but we just keep making the changes for the next group, and so on. So those are some of the main challenges that we've encountered so far. But despite that, the trainings have definitely been overall a net win. They've been a valuable learning experience for my graduate students, and they've resulted in numerous conference presentations, which help us further disseminate the information. And then we've presented to over 10 different organizations in Iowa. And then based on the first responder feedback and suggestions, I developed the app Rescue Voice, which I'll talk about more later. And we've gotten lots of feedback from our participants, and fortunately, it's always been positive. And I'm going to share a couple of those quotes with you now. So this one says, "Thank you so much for coming to the department and presenting to us. You can tell when a training leaves an impact on people with the comments and conversations afterwards. I heard nothing but praise from everyone in attendance, and a bunch of us actually had a pretty long conversation after our meeting Monday night about how to implement the information you gave us and how we can further improve our communication skills on each call we have. This is definitely something that wasn't on our radar before this training, and the department as a whole sees this as a very important skill set to keep working on." So that made me feel pretty darn good. I mean, you really can't ask for more than that. And I think this is a testament to that the first responders, they want this information. And I mean, it's really amazing when we do the role plays, they get into it just immediately. And it's really cool to see them in action, because you can see all of their previous training sort of on top of the training that we've just given them. So they really are open to it, and open to this learning. This is another quote. "Thank you so much for presenting for us. People are still talking about the presentation, and I've seen the boards out and about being talked about. We're placing copies of the boards, the communication boards, in each of our trucks to use on calls, and we look forward to hearing from you when the app is completed." And they did. Everyone heard from me when the app was completed. So just to kind of give you that positive impact that it can make, I wanted to share those with you. So I'm telling you all this because I hope at least a few of you will start presenting in your neck of the woods, or connect with each other and present in Oregon. And you can use the resources from today to create your own presentation and learning objectives, and create a flyer to get the word out. And I have an example of the flyer that I use on the next slide. But I would encourage you to start with those personal connections if you have them. So if you know a firefighter, a paramedic, a police officer, reach out to them, even a friend of a friend, because really that does seem to really help get your foot in the door. And then you can also just cold call and email agencies to get the word out. And then after you present to one, get referrals for others, because they will talk to they know each other. And so we do get those kinds of referrals after we presented to one organization. You also really have to be flexible, but I know if you're on this call, you probably are a flexible person, a problem solver. So you've got to be willing to make changes and adapt to the needs of your audience. So we're all really familiar with doing that with our clients and our students. But that's why we created a Zoom version of our presentation, so we could help those farther away. We also scheduled a hybrid presentation. This was just recently, we completed this. It was over 3 days, and we did this in December for our own Iowa City Fire Department, because I just really wanted to get into Iowa City, our hometown fire department. So I was willing to do whatever they needed, and they wanted us to hit all 3 of their shifts and all 3 of their stations. So we were doing it in person in the main station while the other stations were on Zoom, and then we did 3 days in a row to hit all of their shifts. But you know what? It went really well, and it led to more connections in the area. That's how we got connected with the paratransit organization in Iowa City. It was through that. So just be willing to adapt to what your first responders need. This is a copy of our flyer that I send out to agencies to advertise and promote the trainings. We do it for free, and we do have CEUs. I partnered with a local community college to get the CEUs approved for the paramedics, and that was just all because of networking and student connections. But we do this in about an hour, and they, that seems to work well for them. So now we want to kind of open up the chat again and ask you all, does this seem like something that you could do in your area? Do you see any challenges that you might encounter with a community presentation? What do you all think?
We'll give everyone a moment to type here.
Well, this is one of those topics that Deb just can't stop talking or thinking about. And so the conversation about emergency preparedness began several years ago for us here, particularly with our PT conversations, because they were the ones who were charged with writing emergency plans. And of course, we know that's best done as a team that includes the SLP and everyone who comes in contact with the student. And so here we have the state had a grant for emergency preparedness training throughout communities, and it was a 5-year grant that's now written in. It's not a grant anymore. So it's part of what's supposed to be happening. But on Monday, next Monday, we're having, it has been called the town hall, the statewide therapy town hall, but now it's called Community of Practice because it's coming together. But the conversation is for Monday beyond the PEEP. And the PEEP is one of those documents that the team prepared and kind of vetted across the state. That's Personal Emergency Accommodations Plan. And so we kind of partnered with Alex Hayslip at the ODE level and added things to their slides because their slides said, and don't forget to consider people with disabilities, period. And so we added scenarios and those kind of things. And now the PEEP is part of the recommended, it's put as part of their training materials. And so anything that we can do to partner with that and moving to the next level, and to say one of the first things, the areas, and this could be a full-time job for somebody, but one of the first areas was the bus drivers, transportation. What do they know? And we even had the person at the Department of Ed level talking to us about it. And it's not a mandatory part of their training to work with people with disabilities. I love what you do and sharing a low-tech communication with all those folks, because I wanted to see it on the side of a fire truck so people could use it. But regardless, I'm going to put a link that shares some of the work that we've been doing and invite folks to come to the conversation beyond the PEEP next Monday afternoon. And ladies, you're welcome to join us too. But I'm waiting for an answer from Alex Hayslip to see if he's going to come back to our conversation. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. And there was positive feedback in the chat as well. It sounds like people are feeling that, yes, this is something you could all work towards, which is great. I love the specific recommendation to start with the district safety risk management department or school-based safety committee. That's a fantastic suggestion. So great.
Yeah, and I've seen, even implementing a part of this is better than nothing. So something is better than nothing, and that's 100% true. Also, yeah, school SLP, the workload is huge. So this just seems like more to pile on top of it. And I get that. I worked in the schools for 11 years before I came to Iowa. And I'm fortunate to have these graduate students to help me. But if you are near a university where you could also kind of partner with them and maybe take a little of the workload off yourself, that's something else. But I agree, something's better than nothing. Even if you're making a handout or distributing, some resources, that's a step in the right direction. So, and speaking of resources, let's get into that. We'll go over some more resources so that you can help support a lot of these efforts that we've talked about. So, is there an app for that? That's what almost every group said after we worked with the paper-based communication boards. They were like, hey, we have tablets in our rescue vehicles. We could use them for this. They're really durable, and sometimes the laminated boards, can get ruined. And so I was like, this is a really good idea. I've worked with AAC for a long time, and I know a lot of the apps, but I don't feel like there's one that's specifically made for these kinds of situations. So I got to work, and persistence paid off. I convinced our information technology services and custom solutions and integrations team here at Iowa to collaborate with me. And then I raised money from my department. I was out raising money locally with like the Optimist Club and the Lions Club. I applied for another mini grant from USAC to offset the production costs. And then I was meeting every other week with programmers starting about November 2023 until we got Rescue Voice released on Apple this past July, and then more recently on the Google Play Store. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Rescue Voice. So as you know, the use of AAC, specifically in emergencies, is essential to an individual's health and safety. And Teresa said individuals with disabilities have 4 to 10 times higher risk of becoming a crime victim than people without a disability. And in the ICU setting, also like 33% of patients met candidacy for utilizing AAC. So if they go from, this emergency situation into the ICU, this is another, need for AAC in those moments. So again, there's lots of apps on the market, but Rescue Voice is really unique. I made it really simple in its design to decrease the learning curve for new users, both new users as in new AAC users, but also for our first responders. So it by no means is this a robust app for daily use. It's very specific in its purpose. It does have picture symbols for individuals who are unable to read or spell. It's got vocabulary related to pain, body parts, symptoms, allergies, medications, people and places. Now it does also have a keyboard page for text-to-speech and a page specifically for firefighters and police. It's ready to use with little to no setup. There's really no setup or programming. It's not personalizable at this point or customizable. But that way the emergency and medical personnel don't have to worry about that. In the future, if it's successful, I'm hoping that I can make the app available in multiple languages to assist with the barriers associated with patient-provider communication in diverse populations. I'd like to add more customization options and other features to make the app more versatile. So these are just some sample pages from the app. The main page has the most frequently used vocabulary for emergency calls, and then that's on the left there, and then on the right, there's a body diagram. So when you touch any part of the body, it will speak when you touch it. There's pain scales, and then also different types of pain. And each page has an instruction button that provides a prompt for the first responder. So there's a little blue eye on every page. And if they press it, it will kind of give them the question to ask the patient. And all of these pages, again, were informed by first responders, because they have different protocols that they need to follow when approaching a victim. So we were trying to make sure that this app had the answers to the questions that that they're going to be asking. And then on the next slide, there's some more screenshots here. On the left are partner-assisted scanning instructions actions. So that is, there's an instruction page just so if the person's unable to point, the first responder can quickly see how they might be able to assist them. There's also a short video overview where I walk users through the options of the app. Then there's the keyboard page or text-to-speech page. It's got both an ABC and a QWERTY keyboard. And then on the right side is just a little screenshot of the page that has information about allergies and medications. So that's just a little bit about Rescue Voice, and it is $9.99. This isn't an advertisement. I'm just I did have to charge for it because I need the money to go back into funding its production. So really, I'm not getting anything from it. It's all kind of going back into making it better. So I just want you to know that that's out there. And again, it's on the App Store and the Google Play Store. And we're hoping that more and more first responders, emergency room workers, police will just have this app available for these situations. So. But on to our low-tech boards. I originally made the communication board, like I said, using BoardMaker and based on combining examples that I found online. So I was just Googling, what kind of vocabulary are on these emergency communication boards. And then I would just keep getting feedback every time we did a presentation. I would ask the paramedics and the firefighters, would this be useful? Is there something else we could do instead? But they were on BoardMaker. And then I was lucky enough to collaborate with Teresa and share what I learned to inform the creation of these new emergency response communication boards from Lingraphica. And these are free to download. And they also have the in case of emergency wallet cards with important contact and health information. They're all available on the landing page that Teresa mentioned at the start of the webinar and the links that we're giving you. Have there been any questions or anything else at this point?
I think we're good.
Okay, we'll keep plugging away here. I just wanted to highlight some of these additional resources. So you've probably seen a lot of these, but the patient-provider communication website provides tips and resources for patients and providers. There's lots of downloadable communication boards and visuals. This is one of the places I went when I was trying to create my own boards that can be used in medical settings. There's also opportunities for research and networking. Then we have the USAC emergency site. Teresa already shared a lot about that, as did I with the Disaster Relief Committee. But that's where you can get the emergency and disaster preparedness tools, communication boards, communication passports, those things are there. Then we have the AAC disasterrelief.recovers.org. That is the site that the Disaster Relief Committee uses to get volunteers as well as people who need help, who've lost their AAC system in a national disaster. And then, like Teresa said, we work collaboratively with other organizations to replace those tools, the technology that's lost or damaged. So that is our kind of home base for all of that. And then the disasterstrategies.org, that's the Partnerships, Disability, and Disaster Hotline. There is so much information with them, with just disaster-related needs, temporary housing, accessible transportation, technical assistance, applying for FEMA, disability accommodations. And then they have these weekly stakeholder calls, and I've joined a couple of times, and they are really informed directly from people with disabilities. There are people with disabilities on those calls, and then there's a lot of people that are in charge join the calls, and so they're listening to those needs. So that is a really good organization. And then we also have some other community efforts. So even if you're not able to, onto the next slide, Teresa. Even if you're not able to get out into the community, you could share these resources. There's something called the Blue Envelope Program. And this is to help develop awareness about disability before a law enforcement interaction. Unfortunately, we have seen incidents on the news where bad things can happen when there's a misunderstanding with the police about why someone is acting a certain way, like appearing drunk or not following directions. And so this Blue Envelope Program aims to address that, to get professional training so that they're familiar with this. But the thing about it is that there's not like a central site. Teresa and I worked on this. We couldn't find a central site, but you could contact your local police department and just inquire about the Blue Envelope program and see if they have anything about that, if they have something similar, if they're familiar with it.
So I'm going to pull a question from the chat to you real quick, Krista. There's a question about Rescue Voice. Is it correct that the app is available for iPads but not phones?
Yeah, currently it's only tablet based, so iPads or Android tablets. I had to choose between a tablet or a phone, and just for accessibility, with the phone being larger for vision and physical needs, we went with, for the iPad, the tablet being larger for that, we went with that. I hope to make it available on phones at some point, but I had to pick one or the other, and so because of my limited budget, but I hope to make it available on phones in the future. Okay, and then we have Carter kits. So you may have heard of these before. They're designed to comfort children with autism, but certainly could help other populations as well. And these aren't just for first responders, but they could be for mental health in schools, churches, hospitals. They have things like weighted blankets, sunglasses, noise-reducing earmuffs, sensory toys, non-verbal like AAC kind of cue cards. So if you go to carterkits.org, you can get more information about the kits, the training, and some testimonials about Carter kits. Okay, so I think we're coming to the end here. Teresa, I think I'm handing it back over to you.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and conclude. You all know what we talked about today. The real thing that I want to highlight is the next steps. So we hope that everyone here is inspired to consider how you can start incorporating emergency preparedness into your treatment plans, as well as reach out to first responders to discuss the content. And it sounds like some already are, so kudos, and let's all keep the momentum going. Like Krista mentioned earlier, if you do have access to a first responder in your personal network, that can be a great place to start. And then finally, look for those opportunities to educate others about interacting with AAC users and those with communication challenges. I'm sure we all know that, increasing that general public awareness can be so helpful for device users and can only lead to positive impacts in an emergency situation. I do also want to mention that if you go to that landing page that we had the QR code for in the beginning, we did develop 2 self-study courses at Lingraphica. They are free. You can access those from that landing page, and they are designed to give you some framework for implementing the steps with a client. So there's 2 courses. One is designed to help you implement the recommendations into a treatment plan with a client, and you can get CEU credit for that. So it'll walk you through the steps and what you need to submit to us to get CEU credit. And then the second one is aimed at giving you the tools that you need to put together a presentation, get started on that, reach out to those first responders, and ideally, hopefully get something set up. So again, that course has lots of resources, some of which we talked about today, many of which we talked about today, but we'll kind of give you some places to get started and some guidance on reaching out, give you an example of the flyer and tips from Krista's program. And then you can earn free CEUs for that. So both of those courses are completely free. And, you know, if you're doing the work, we want to give back to you and allow you to earn some CEU credit for that work. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful. We had some great discussion throughout. I really appreciate you guys taking part in the chat, and just wanted to see if anybody has any additional questions or thoughts, or if you have done some work in this area and have suggestions as well. Feel free to come off mute or type in the chat.
Yeah, open up your mic and this is the great time to ask these questions. Thank you, Deb. A therapy and school environments community of practice town hall. Put the link in there for everyone.
And just whenever you start learning more about it, I remember when we started this conversation a few years ago, even talking to people who'd been in this world for a long time, unless you really say, well, what does that mean? And unless you really start pulling that apart, what does it mean to consider people with disabilities in emergency planning? You don't even imagine all the scenarios. But whenever you get fired up about it again, like I am right now, wishing that was the only thing I had on my plate to do, because I'd like to stomp my feet and make some noise right now. But just having that fueled, and Chandra's been dropping links in the chat here. Have those links available, because you're going to be in so many conversations where this is going to be relatable. And to have a link that says, oh, and don't forget this, and to drop it in a chat. Every time you do that, you're making somebody think about the importance of it. So just share it in any way you can and push it out there, because I think we can all see relevance in every aspect of our life to make sure that we're considering those who need to be heard.
You know, and when I talk to the first responders, at first this is all kind of like they're really unsure, and then they're like, oh wait, remember, the preacher's wife who had a stroke? Oh, remember? Or actually, my nephew has Down syndrome. Like, they all start thinking about, like, people, like, oh, that's what that tablet was, or they just they start realizing that they have seen glimpses of it in their life, and
dispel the myths.
Yeah.
That are out there, the fear of somebody who communicates differently. You start with a one-on-one, you start with that and take it to the next level.
And everyone I've worked with, they really want to help. Those paramedics and firefighters, they want to help. They want to solve the problem. So they really soak it up.
Yeah, another thing to know is that if you do set up some training with first responders and you're doing it through our free course, we'll send you communication boards to hand out to them, laminated communication boards. And also, if it would be beneficial, Krista's showing up one, if it would be beneficial for you just to show them, like, this is a high-tech device, let them know there's multiple different devices out there. But if it's helpful for them to see something and, get hands-on, we'll send a loaner device out for that presentation as well. So just, to support spreading the word.
All of our schools have built-in drills. And what I've heard over the last couple of years is that very often the kids, these children who need this sort of training, are kind of left out a little bit, or they're just kind of ushered along, but also, this would be a great opportunity when they do those drills to have some first responders on site when this is happening, so that they get used to, there's an emergency, there's first responders.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Oh, and Krista just put into the chat, good to know if you are a USAC member, they'll reimburse you for the purchase of Rescue Voice.
Oh, that's amazing. So that's free, guys.
Yeah, so in a way it's free. Yeah, if you're a USAC member, it's free.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for your time today. We appreciate being asked to be here today, and we hope it was helpful. We'll put our information in the chat, too, if you have any questions after or want to reach out.
Thank you so much,
I'm speaking for Krista, but
thank you,
I'm certain she will.